Okay, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into your source material, specifically this excerpt called Day14.mp3.
Right, and it tackles something pretty universal for English learners.
Yeah, it zeroes in on, well, let's be honest, those grammar mistakes that seem to catch almost everyone out at some point.
Mm-hmm. That feeling is definitely familiar. You put a sentence together, you think, yeah, that sounds okay, and then maybe you get a bit of a blank look.
Or a gentle correction, which is helpful, but still.
Still makes you pause,
Hmm?
or maybe you just feel it inside, that little question mark. Was that the right tense? Did I need a word there?
Exactly, that little bump in the road when you're just trying to get your point across smoothly. So, our mission here with this deep dive is to really unpack what this source, this day14.mp3, is telling us.
We want to pull out the key insights it offers about these, super common errors.
And really importantly, look at the simple, practical ways the source suggests you can actually fix them.
Yeah, the goal, based on your material, is pretty clear. Helping you sound, well, more natural and definitely more confident when you're speaking English.
And let's get this out right at the start, something the source itself emphasizes. Making grammar mistakes. Totally normal.
Oh, absolutely. It's part of learning any language. It happens to everyone. And honestly, even native speakers slip up sometimes,
Hmm?
especially when they're just chatting casually.
For sure, I know I do. So the vibe here isn't about, like, achieving grammatical perfection overnight.
Not at all. It's about progress. It's about becoming more aware. And it's about having some, concrete tools to work with.
Think of it like we're using your source material as a kind of guide, pointing out the specific spots where learners often stumble, according to the source.
Exactly. And once you can actually spot those patterns in your own speech and you understand the pretty simple rules the source lays out,
Then you've got the power to work on them, right? To consciously refine how you communicate.
that's the idea. So let's start where the source starts acknowledging that universal challenge, the whole grammar mistake thing itself.
Yeah, that feeling, you're mid-conversation, maybe trying to think on your feet, and you just hesitate. Was that past simple or present perfect I needed?
Or did I need an as on that verb?
Articles. Oh man, articles. Should there be one there? Which one? A, then Ed. Nothing.
That exact moment of hesitation, that uncertainty, the source really validates that. It says, look, this happens to everyone learning English. It doesn't matter if you're just starting or if you're pretty advanced.
It's true. Even really fluent non-native speakers might trip over these specific little points sometimes, especially when they're speaking quickly or thinking about complex ideas.
So it's definitely reassuring, as the source suggests, to know you're not alone in hitting these snags.
And the really good news, the encouraging bit from this source, is that a lot of these common mistakes, they aren't like fundamental misunderstandings of English.
No, often they're quite small, specific things. Things that, once you know what to look for, are actually fairly straightforward to fix with a bit of focused practice.
They're common for a reason, right? Maybe because they highlight a difference between English and your first language, or maybe they're just tiny details that are easy to overlook.
Exactly. So the objective laid out in the source is super practical. Let's focus on the most common ones, the high-frequency errors.
And let's look at the simple, actionable ways the source suggests to correct them.
It's all about getting the most bang for your buck, practice-wise. Aiming for sentences that don't just get the meaning across, but also sound, more natural, more confident.
It's like getting a targeted list of common detours and some clear signposts to get back on the main road. So where does day14.mp3 tell us to start this grammar road trip?
It points right at one of the trickiest areas. Surprisingly tricky, given how small the words are.
Let me guess. Articles.
You got it. Articles. Misusing or sometimes completely forgetting a, an, and a.
Yeah.
The source flags this as a really, really frequent error.
And they seem so insignificant, don't they? Just little 1 or 2 letter words.
Tiny. But the source makes a really strong argument that these little guys, the articles, can actually change the whole meaning or at least the precision of your sentence. Nailing them is pretty key for sounding natural.
So what's the core logic? How do they work, according to the source?
Well, think of them like little pointers. They signal whether you're talking about something general, something non-specific, or if you're pointing to something specific, something the listener already knows about or that's unique in the context.
Okay, general versus specific.
That's the main distinction the source highlights. The basic rule it gives is use a or an when you're talking about something general. Something singular, countable, but not a particular one.
Right. Let's use the source's own examples to see this in action. It says, if I say I saw a cat in the street, What does a cat mean there?
According to the source, a cat means exactly that, any cat. It wasn't a specific cat we've discussed before. It was just one random cat out of all the cats that might exist.
Okay, introducing it for the first time, not specific.
Exactly. A signals it's singular, countable, and generally introduced. And of course, an is just the form you use before a vowel sound, like an apple. But the a versus the concept is the big one here.
Got it. Then the source contrasts this. It says, but if I say I saw the cat on my neighbor's porch, why the now?
Because, as the source explains, the is for something specific. The cat on my neighbor's porch points to a particular cat.
Ah, okay, so maybe it's a cat we both know, or the context makes it clear which one.
Precisely. Maybe we're just talking about your neighbor's annoying Siamese, or maybe you're literally pointing and saying, look at the cat on the porch. That specific one right there.
Yeah.
The signal's uniqueness or shared knowledge.
So general and, specific the, that's the main rule the source is driving home.
It's fundamental.
But then the source brings up another related, very common mistake, using the when you actually mean something in general, of a whole category.
Yes. This happens a lot. The example given is saying, I like the pizza.
When you don't mean that specific pizza we ordered last night, but just pizza as a food in general.
Exactly. And this often comes from translating directly because some other languages would use an article there. But in English, when you talk about general concepts or categories, especially uncountable nouns or plurals,
You often leave the article out entirely.
right. So for uncountable nouns used generally, like pizza, the substance, chocolate, water, information, advice, music, you typically don't use the.
And the source gives the correct general forms. I like pizza, or I love chocolate.
Correct. No article means you're talking about the general concept.
Yeah.
I like pizza. I like pizza in general. If you said, I like the pizza, like we mentioned, it refers to a specific pizza we know about.
And this applies to plural nouns used generally too, right? Like the source implies you'd say dogs are friendly, not the dogs are friendly, if you mean dogs in general.
Absolutely. The dogs would mean specific dogs, maybe the ones in your street or the ones we were just discussing, but dogs with no article refers to the whole category. Same with abstract nouns. Happiness is important, not the happiness is important.
Okay, let's try to make this even clearer with a few more examples following the source's logic. If I'm talking about any job, I might say, I need a job.
General, singular, countable. Makes sense.
But if I'm talking about the specific job you told me about yesterday, I'd say, I applied for the job.
Specific, known reference.
Thanks.
Perfect. Or how about education is key to success?
General, abstract concept, no, the.
Right, but the education I received at that school was excellent.
Specific education. So you need the. Okay. It feels like you constantly have to ask yourself, is this specific in this context or am I talking generally?
That's pretty much the core question the source wants you to ask. Getting articles right, making that distinction, really adds a layer of precision and, naturalness to your English. Mastering this, based on the source's advice, is a big step.
It really seems like it. Okay, so that's articles. What's the next common pitfall highlighted in day14.mp3?
The source moves on to another seemingly small detail that causes a lot of trouble. Forgetting to add s or es to verbs in the present simple tense.
Yes. The third person singular s.
Exactly. When the subject is he, she, or it, this little ending gets dropped surprisingly often.
Even by people who have been learning for a while, the source gives a typical example of the mistake, something like, she walked to work every day.
Right. Now, walk is the base form, but the phrase every day signals a routine, a habit. That calls for the present simple tense.
And in the present simple, for she, that base form walk isn't correct.
No. As the source points out, the correct form is she walks to work every day. That little s is grammatically required.
It seems so minor, but it's a fundamental rule for this tense and subject combo. The source lays out the basic present simple rule pretty clearly, doesn't it?
It does. It says for I, you, we, and they, you just use the base form of the verb.
Like their examples, I work, you play, we study, they live. Simple enough.
Simple enough. But then comes the crucial part, the bit the source emphasizes, because it's where the errors happen for he, she, or it.
You have to add s or s to the verb in the present simple.
Yes. The examples given are he works, she watches. Note the s after she. It goes another s after s.
So it's not just action verbs. It applies to state verbs too, right? Like the source's pattern suggests you'd say, he likes coffee, not he like coffee.
Correct. Or she needs help, not she need help. It seems difficult, not It seemed difficult.
Even basic facts. The sun rises in the east, sun is an it.
Exactly. And a really common one is with the verb have. It changes completely for he shite in the present simple. You don't say he have a car.
Right, it becomes he has a car, or she has brown eyes, it has 4 legs.
That s ending, or the change to has, it's not optional. It packs in grammatical information. Third person, singular subject, present simple tense.
And the source encourages active self-correction here, doesn't it? It says something like, listen to yourself. If you're talking about he, she, or it, remember that ls.
That self-monitoring is key, according to the source. Knowing the rule is step 1. But training your ear, training your mouth to automatically produce that is when you're talking about he, she, or it in a habitual or factual context. That takes conscious effort.
Especially because, like you said, maybe your first language doesn't mark the third person singular in the same way, so it's easy to forget in the flow of speaking.
Very easy. That's why this error persists even for quite advanced learners sometimes. Actively practicing saying sentences with he shite plus verbs is really the way to solidify it.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've done articles and the present simple s. Where does the source take us next? It looks like sentence structure, specifically for questions.
Yes, getting question word order right. The source points out a major reason for mistakes here. People often try to translate the question structure directly from their own language.
Which often doesn't work in English because English question structure can be quite rigid.
It'd have very specific patterns, yes. And if you just rearrange the words based on another language's rules, it often sounds wrong, or at least very unnatural.
The classic example the source gives of this mistake is someone saying, you like coffee with rising intonation, hoping it works as a yes-no question.
And while, context and intonation might help someone understand, it's not the standard grammatical structure for a question in English.
So what is the standard structure, according to the source? It mentions auxiliary verbs being key.
Absolutely key. The source explains that for many verbs in the present simple, and past simple actually, you need to use the auxiliary verb do or does, or did for past, at the beginning of a yes-no question.
So that incorrect, you like coffee, should be.
Do you like coffee? You insert do before the subject you.
And if the subject was she,
then you'd use do's again at the beginning. Does she like coffee? Or does he work here?
And notice the main verb, like work, goes back to the base form. The S is on does.
Exactly. Does carries the third person singular marker. That's a really important point the source implicitly makes.
Okay, so that's for verbs needing dodos. What about questions with the verb to be? The source mentions those too.
Right. For am, is, are, or was, were in the past, the structure is different. You don't use do or does. The be verb itself moves to the front.
Like the example, is she coming to the party? Is comes before she.
Correct. The structure is be verb plus subject plus rest of sentence. So, are you tired? Is it raining? Am I late? The be verb acts as its own auxiliary in questions.
And the source also quickly covers questions with modal verbs can, will, should, etc.
Yeah, same principle as be verbs, really. The modal verb itself moves to the beginning before the subject.
They're examples. Can you swim? And will they be there?
Perfect. Modal plus subject plus base verb. Should I call him, could you help me? Might it snow later?
So the really big takeaway from the source on questions seems to be this reliance on auxiliary verbs do, does, is, are, can, will, etc., placed before the subject in most standard questions.
That's the fundamental pattern in English that differs from many other languages. You can't just rely on intonation or putting the verb first like in some languages. You usually need that auxiliary helper word in the right place.
Even for questions starting with we words, like where, what, when, why, who, how.
Yes, the pattern usually holds. Question word plus auxiliary plus subject plus main verb. Like, where do you live? What is she doing? When can we meet? That auxiliary is almost always there after the question word.
Understanding that structure, that need for the auxiliary, seems crucial for sounding right when asking questions.
It really is. And interestingly, the source points out that this need for auxiliaries isn't just for questions.
Ah, right. It links it directly to forming negative sentences, too.
Exactly. The source flags a very similar mistake. Forgetting the auxiliary verb do or does when making a sentence negative in the present simple.
And the example of the mistake is someone saying, I not like spicy food.
Which, again, feels like a direct translation attempt from a language where you might just put not after the subject or verb.
But standard English doesn't work that way for most verbs in the simple tenses. You need the auxiliary again.
You do. The correct form, as the source states, is I don't like spicy food.
don't being the contraction of do not.
Right. The structure is subject plus dodos plus not plus base verb. Do or does comes before not.
And just like with questions, if the subject is he, she, or it, you use does.
Correct. So she doesn't like spicy food,
Mm.
or he doesn't play tennis. It doesn't work. Again, notice the main verb like play, work, stays in the base form. Doesn't handles the S.
The source really emphasizes this connection, stating clearly. So always remember, in English, negatives and questions need an auxiliary verb like do or does.
It's a powerful point because it shows dodos isn't just for questions. It's fundamental to the structure of both questions and negatives in simple tenses for most verbs. It acts as a grammatical helper.
Getting that dodos auxiliary right in both contexts seems like a major step towards more accurate English sentences.
Definitely. It's a core structural difference compared to many languages, and mistakes here are quite noticeable.
Okay, articles, the auxiliaries in questions and negatives. We're covering some major ground here based on your source. What's the next classic mistake it tackles?
Now we get into tenses. Specifically, the source highlights the very common confusion between the past simple and the present perfect.
This one feels like a bigger conceptual hurdle for many learners. They both talk about the past, right?
They do, but they frame the past event differently or connect it to the present differently. And the source points out two typical ways learners get this wrong.
What's the first incorrect example?
I have went.
Okay, what's wrong there?
It's using the wrong verb form. The present perfect tense is formed with have or has plus the past participle. Went is the past simple form of go.
So the past participle of go is gone.
Exactly. So the correct present perfect form is I have gone. Using have went is mixing the structure with the wrong verb part. A common slip-up with irregular verbs.
Got it. So that's a form mistake. What's the other incorrect example the source gives?
I have seen him yesterday.
Now, have seen is the correct present perfect form of see. So what's the problem here?
The problem is yesterday. The source explains that you generally cannot use the present perfect tense with a specific finished time reference in the past, like yesterday, last week, in 2010, etc.
This seems to be the core of the confusion. So what's the guiding rule the source provides to sort this out? When do you use past simple and when present perfect?
The key distinction presented in the source is this. Use past simple with specific times. And conversely, use present perfect when the time is not mentioned or when it's indefinite or ongoing.
Okay, specific time, past simple, no specific time or relevance to now, present perfect.
That's the main guideline from the source. So let's look at I've seen him yesterday. Again, yesterday is a specific finished time.
So according to the rule, you can't use present perfect. You need past simple.
Exactly. The correct sentence using the past simple form of see is I saw him yesterday.
Okay, so anytime I mention when something happened specifically in the past,
Like last night, an hour ago, on Tuesday when I was a child, in the 1990s. The source indicates you should default to the past simple.
I finished the report last night. She called me 2 hours ago. We visited Paris in 2018.
All perfect examples following the source's rule. The specific time anchors the action firmly in the past, requiring the past simple.
And the source gives a really useful tip to remember this, right? Something like a checklist.
Yeah, very practical rule of thumb. If you say a time word phrase like yesterday, last week, or in 2019 use past simple, it's a trigger. See the specific past time marker. Think past simple.
And the other side of that coin, from the source, if there's no specific time mentioned, use present perfect.
Right. This is where the source brings back its examples to illustrate. I saw her yesterday, correct, because yesterday is specific, but I have seen her before, also correct, because before is indefinite. It means sometime in the past, but we don't know or care exactly when.
So the present perfect is more about the experience itself or a past action with present relevance when the exact time isn't the point.
Often, yes, like, have you ever eaten snails?
Yeah.
Focus on the life experience, not when. Or, I've lost my keys. The result now is I can't find them. The exact moment I lost them isn't specified. Or, she has lived here for 10 years. The action started in the past and continues to the present.
So the source's tip about looking for those specific time words yesterday, last month, in 2020 is a really powerful shortcut for making the right choice in many situations.
It's a very effective guideline derived from your source material for navigating this tricky distinction. Focus on the time reference. Specific and finished. Past simple. Unspecified, indefinite, or connected to now. Often present perfect.
It really clarifies things. Okay, so we've gone through articles, the S, question negative auxiliaries, and past simple versus present perfect, all key grammar points from the source. But then the source kind of shifts gears a bit, offering some broader perspective.
It does, and it's a really important perspective shift, I think. It acknowledges, again, that grammar mistakes just happen to everyone.
Right. And crucially, the source points out that many of these small errors, especially when you're just talking casually, don't actually break communication.
Exactly. People will often still understand your main point, even if you, say, forget an article or mix up a tense slightly. Basic understanding is usually still possible.
That's so important to hear. It takes some pressure off knowing you don't have to be absolutely perfect to be understood.
It does. But the source immediately balances this by saying, if you want to sound more fluent, more natural, then consciously working on these common errors is valuable.
So it's not about just being understood, but about achieving that smoother, more idiomatic quality in your speech. Targeting these high-frequency mistakes, like the ones outlined in the source, helps you get there.
Precisely. And then the source adds another layer. It touches on the fact that spoken English isn't always monolithic. It can be flexible, and sometimes informal usage varies from the strict textbook rules.
Yeah, especially across different English-speaking regions or in very casual contexts.
This is where they bring in that perhaps slightly controversial example. The source notes that in informal American English, you might actually hear someone say,
"She don't like coffee."
right. Now, based on the standard grammar rule we just discussed, third-person singular negative needs doesn't.
"She don't" is technically incorrect according to standard grammar. It should be "she doesn't."
Correct. But the source includes it to illustrate a point about descriptive linguistics versus prescriptive grammar. It's describing a form that does exist in some informal spoken varieties.
It's not endorsing it as correct for someone learning standard English, but acknowledging its existence in the real world.
Exactly. It shows that language is alive and can vary. For a learner aiming for broad intelligibility and standard fluency, doesn't is the target form to practice and use. But knowing that variations like she don't exist helps you understand real-world speech better, and perhaps feel less confused if you hear it.
It introduces that nuance between what's taught as standard correct grammar and how language is sometimes actually used informally.
It's a useful piece of context, and it leads perfectly into the source's overall takeaway message, which kind of balances everything we've discussed.
What's that core advice?
Essentially, don't be afraid to make mistakes, but also listen carefully and correct yourself when you can.
That really sums it up beautifully, doesn't it? Have the courage to speak. Know that mistakes will happen.
But also cultivate that awareness. Listen to yourself, listen to others, notice the patterns, and actively work on refining the areas the source highlighted, like articles, the S, auxiliaries, and tense usage.
It's about finding that balance between bravery and attentiveness, using actual communication as your practice ground.
Exactly. It's an ongoing cycle. Speak, listen, notice, adjust, speak again.
Okay, so based on all these insights from your source material, day14.mp3, it wraps up by giving you, the listener, a very concrete challenge.
Yeah, practical steps you can take right away. Step 1, just listen to yourself speak English today. No judgment, just tune in.
Be aware of how you're forming sentences. Maybe notice if any of the areas we discussed pop up.
Step 2, pick one. Just one of these common mistakes to focus on for now. Don't overwhelm yourself. Maybe it's articles, maybe it's that pesquise.
Or maybe it's trying to get do and does right in questions. Just choose one target.
Step 3, actively practice saying sentences correctly, focusing on that one point. Say them out loud. Make the correct form feel more comfortable in your mouth.
Like if you pick the best, consciously practice saying things like, he walks, she talks, it works, over and over.
Or if it's articles, practice contrasting, I need a pen, with where's the pen I gave you. Make the distinction explicit.
And the source adds a nice reflective prop too, suggesting you think about a grammar mistake you used to make, but you've managed to fix.
Yeah, what was it? And more importantly, how do you fix it? What strategy worked for you then?
Because remembering that past success and how you achieved it can give you confidence and maybe even a method for tackling your current focus area.
It really reinforces that progress is possible and highlights what learning techniques resonate with you personally.
Well, this has been a really thorough exploration of the grammar points raised in your source, day14.mp3. We've covered the challenges with articles, the crucial present simple S, getting question and negative structures right with auxiliaries, and sorting out past simple versus present perfect using that specific time rule.
And woven throughout was the source's core message. Mistakes are normal, Practice targeted areas, don't let fear stop you, but do listen and aim to improve for greater fluency and naturalness.
Absolutely. And thinking about that interesting point the source made regarding informal usage, like, she don't like coffee, it does leave us with a compelling question to ponder, stemming directly from the material. How does understanding both the standard rules and the existence of these real-world variations actually affect how you approach learning and using English?
Yeah, do you aim strictly for the standard form all the time? Or does knowing about variations change how you listen, or maybe even adapt your own speech in very casual settings? It's that classic prescriptive versus descriptive tension in language.
Something interesting to think about. Your source also gave a little teaser for what might be next in the sequence. Something about storytelling,
Ah, yes, it's mentioned moving on to telling stories in English and making speech more engaging.
which sounds like a great application of these grammatical foundations, using them to build narratives and connect with people more effectively.
Definitely a logical next step.
So we really hope this deep dive into the grammar challenges and solutions presented in your source material has given you some clear insights and practical strategies.
Remember the advice. Keep practicing, keep listening to yourself and others, and view every mistake not as a failure, but just as feedback pointing you towards your next learning opportunity.
Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.